The final exorcism in The Exorcist Believer involves significant disclosures, a death, and the setup for a new trilogy of films in order to save Catherine and Angela's lives. The sequel to The Exorcist moves the franchise's focus to new family whose lives are altered after their daughters become possessed by demons, picking up over 50 years after the events of the first film. Victor searches for Chris MacNeil in the hopes that she will assist the two families in rescuing the young daughters. In the end, the girls' destiny is left up to their parents and a variety of religious authorities. It should come as no surprise that The Exorcist Believer builds to a pivotal exorcism in which Catherine and Angela's lives are at stake. This occurs after Catherine's parents try to assist her at home while Angela is sequestered in a mental health facility. After Catherine stabs Chris in the eyes, Chris is unable to participate in the final exorcism, but she urges Victor to enlist a diverse group of people with varying religious and ethnic backgrounds to assist with the exorcism. The whole narrative comes to a tidy conclusion without the post-credit sequence from The Exorcist Believer, but the conclusions still allow for other stories. Victor's home is the site of The Exorcist Believer's last exorcism. After the area is ready for an exorcism, Catherine and Angela are escorted there together. Catherine's parents, Catherine's church pastor, Victor's neighbor who is a nurse and used to be a nun, a local root doctor, and another neighbor who believes in God all accompany him. As soon as the Catholic priest informs them that he is unable to do the exorcism as promised, the plot goes haywire. Instead, he gives the nurse Anne command instead. The root doctor turns the evening around after the girls criticize Anne for her history and fail in their initial attempts to drive the devil out of her. This prompts the devil to disclose that everyone present must make an unthinkable decision. They must decide which girl will survive and which will perish. Only one of them will survive, the devil says, alluding to a fatal choice Victor made in the past. Tony, Catherine's father, becomes frightened and tells the devil he wants Catherine to live, even if Victor and Catherine's mother Miranda concur that they cannot and will not make that decision. At first, it seems as though the devil has accepted Tony's choice since Catherine starts talking and seems normal, while Angela starts to float in midair before passing out on the ground. But now, when Catherine passes away and Angela starts breathing again, the demon's cunning comes into play. Catherine is removed from the world of living, while efforts are made to save her life. Tony's death decision in The Exorcist Believer is similar to Victor's previous one in that the person who is selected to survive indeed passes away. One of the major twists in the conclusion of The Exorcist Believer relates to the opening scene in which Victor's wife dies. Victor's pregnant wife suffers terrible injuries in an earthquake in Haiti, and he is faced with the difficult decision of whether to save her life or that of their unborn daughter. Given that Angela survived the 13-year time jump, he clearly complied with his wife's request that he safeguard the child at all means. The demon doesn't tell anyone until the exorcism that Victor really decided to save his wife rather than Angela, but the infant ended up surviving the procedure. Much of their connection is recontextualized when it is revealed that Victor preferred his wife over Angela. Although Angela was unaware of this, it does explain why Victor is now keeping such a close eye on her. After she recovers, Victor and Angela won't have time to discuss the discovery because of the Exorcist Believer's frightening focus, but it wouldn't be shocking if this strains their relationship moving forward if she remembers. After the exorcism, Angela has a definite destiny when she goes back to school, but Catherine's fate in The Exorcist Believer is more dismal. The movie suggests that after she dies, she is drawn to hell. Catherine is seen in the woods once more just before numerous hands start pulling her underwater. This seems to be a graphic depiction of Catherine being missiled into becoming the sacrifice and then being carried to hell by demons. It's uncertain if Catherine will appear in The Exorcist Believer for the last time in the series or if something from her time in hell will come up in the follow-up. The return of Linda Blair as Regan in The Exorcist Believer arguably the biggest surprise of the film's conclusion. Regan's experiences following The Exorcist are frequently mentioned in the film, but she is not a central character. Instead, for the majority of the running time, her fate has remained a mystery. Thankfully, Linda Blair makes a brief reappearance in The Exorcist Believer, confirming that Regan is still alive and thriving. In one of the last moments, we see Regan and Chris getting back together in the hospital. The presence suggests that The Exorcist Deceiver will feature a lot more of Regan for viewers. The identity of the primary demon that inhabits Catherine and Angela is one plot aspect in The Exorcist Believer that can cause some confusion. Although it is never given a name, there are hints that the demon is acquainted with Chris and that she has previously interacted with this spiritual entity. It has been established that Pazuzu is not the exorcist believer's demon, despite the suggestion that she is. In pre-release interviews, director David Gordon Green made this revelation, noting that the sequel features a new demon. He declines to acknowledge the new demons identified, though, and neither does the exorcist believer. There may be more to the story of Angela's life being spared in The Exorcist believer than first appears. There are glimpses of Angela's mother receiving protection when she is still pregnant in the closing moments. This could imply that Angela's life was genuinely spared by the blessing, rendering the similarities to Victor's previous decision to die coincidental. This would imply that Angela can still be possessed even though the blessing is powerful enough to keep the demon from murdering her. Which interpretation each spectator chooses to accept is ultimately up to them. It should come as no surprise that The Exorcist believer's finale allows room for a sequel, given that Universal announced the film as the first in a new trilogy. The confirmation of the sequel's name, The Exorcist, Deceiver, suggests that viewers are in for more than what they see. It may be an indication that Catherine and Angela's destinies are not quite as sealed as thought when the pastor particularly refers to the devil as a deceiver following the initial suggestion of the death decision. Regardless, it is certain that the demon will reappear in some capacity, maybe triggering the sorrow that Catherine's parents endure. The plot of The Exorcist Deceiver will undoubtedly expand on Chris and Regan's reconciliation as well. It's clear that the decision to have Linda Blair return for a brief sequence is intended to whet viewers' appetites for more of her and Ellen Burstyn in the follow-up. The aim is quite evident, even though neither actress's role in the sequel has been formally confirmed. Both women contributed a great deal to The Exorcist believer. The question then becomes whether Victor, Angela, and other characters will continue to play major roles in The Exorcist Deceiver, or whether the franchise will totally return to the McNeil family. The conclusion of The Exorcist believer conveys a message of optimism and faith. The Exorcist believer is a horror film about the demonic possession of two young girls that involves graphic fatalities, but it also imparts to viewers the important lesson that everyone ought to believe in goodness and even God. Victor doesn't appear to modify his perspective on her destiny until he starts to think that the exorcism might be successful and gets back in touch with his daughter via his wife's scarf. In case there was any uncertainty regarding the genuine significance of hope and belief in The Exorcist believer, Ann Dowd's last voiceover monologue clarifies everything.